Mein Kampf.
Mein Kampf to have. We didn't have it. We were good citizens and gave it to the French because they wanted it right away.
So they could take them on.
Right. The French wanted a suit. If there was a suit in the house from the men, a radio, and a photo, or a camera. You had to come down to the commandant and bring them back. And we didn't have any, so we could honestly say, hey, we already gave everything away to the Russians, right? So my sister still had it. And when we were going for this fruit outside of Stuttgart, there were the Americans, right? They were not that far away. They were going to come into Stuttgart. It was an administrative thing that they were going to go into Stuttgart where the French were, and the French were going, further west or whatever. And they said, we're going to be in July 45 in Stuttgart. Don't give them your suit and your cameras. We don't need them, right? Well, that was easier said than done because the French said, if you don't, we have some nice places for you. Right? So actually, I think my sister, I forget how it went, but I think my sister did go down to the commandantur and gave her a suit. She kept one from my brother-in-law when he came, and I got one, a suit from my dad with Mom's jewelry. Mom's jewelry bought a lot. Bought 70 cartons of cigarettes for a 1 carat. Yeah. And that was a displaced persons. They got a lot of money then because they would get reimbursed from the occupation forces. And so I sold that to him and he gave me 70 cartons of cigarettes, and that held us. It was my dad coming out of prison and clothes and things that held them for a year. Mom didn't come. But my mom's jewelry, diamonds and pretty jewelry was gone. Then I worked for the Americans when they came in. Civil censorship, I already said that, and as a chambermaid, I had to learn how to press up army shirts, three creases, right? And they were all wool. And we had always people working for us and for him. I was always told to do my own wool and everything, but I had not to have to iron difficult things with a cloth and make it wet and steam it up and stuff like that. So that's how the shirts had to be done because they were wool and you couldn't do that with a blank iron. Right? And but that bought us 2 army shirts washed and ironed for a piece of soap. Or if the guy was generous, he gave a Hershey bar. And then sometimes I took the Hershey bar to my sister's kids. I took the soap for her to wash, so she had something for the kids to wash. See, people had rations, like in the war. Rations were, and there's rations that went like this, vitamin connections, right? If you had in the war connections to some farm or so, you lived not bad, but most people did, right? And it got worse and worse in the city. But after war, they gave you ration cards, and there was really nothing unless you knew somebody. In most farms where you tried to trade, like I tried to trade with my rations, there was a joke. The farmer said, no thank you, my cow has an oil painting from Rembrandt on the wall. My wife has a mint coat, right? And my pigs have jewelry. So therefore, I don't need any more lady. So it was overdone, but it was, everybody was bringing them their last silver spoon, or anyone who had not lost everything was in a position to trade in. And those were also the first ones to get back on their feet if they had substantial trade-ins, right? The black market was the thing. You met and you traded and bought. Right? And then the MPs would come and everybody disappeared. And the MPs are gone and the market is back.
That was one way people could get what they needed, I guess.
Yeah,
huh?
Susan, it's about like Isabel would never gone away, right? You have to do finally something.
I'll stop this for a minute. Okay.
One of these airways, like you used to go down in the cellar, how the whole house would shake. And to me, that was so terrible. Not knowing who would make it,
Yeah.
down. And the other thing was one time when you knew your exit, I showed Albert our basements in Germany was there to have potatoes. You have to come around now.
Oh, that's fine.
You're in the sun.
Okay.
And weren't made for having people down there, right? So they had made some beds down there. And it was sure solid, but if it got that you couldn't get out of the exit,
If the building
they
started.
The exit could have, maybe the house was intact and the exit was blocked by debris.
Right.
We had to go,
people.
they
Right.
had meetings of going next door, which we did. You could go from one cellar to another. They had done that, and so they weren't made that way, but people made doors to the next,
Like
apartment
underground
building.
passageways?
Yeah, well, no, cellars.
No. That's it. Okay.
You have apartment buildings,
Yeah.
big apartment buildings in a big city. And cellars underneath there, they were for vegetables, right?
Right.
And your belongings, right? And when the war came, they made doors to the next, to the next, to the next. And that was our salvage one time when we couldn't get out the front, and it wasn't even something big, we just couldn't open the door. And I opened this one, I think I told you too, and I said, the aerator's over, you guys can go upstairs, we just can't get out, and didn't get an answer. All of them said completely untouched, nice. It was one of those, we call them blockbusters, to have the way it was coming, I guess, it ripped their lungs.
Was there something called concussion bombs or something like that?
Now, we call them blockbusters, the immense pressure when it hit.
My God. Killed all those people just sitting there.
It burst their lungs. Right? Apparently, they were too close on the one side. It ripped the window open. Most cellars had no windows, but some of them had a little place where the coal came in. The coalman who brought the stuff for the central heating, he would not carry it down there. He would just shush it down.
Yeah.
And I guess that blew that open and left the pressure in a blockbuster, we called them. Right? They had Susan, did you ever see, in German cities had them all over, like little towers, and they had the notification of the theater, things like that on there. They had them all over the city, this notification about as high as this and around.
Oh, right, yeah.
We call them Litfaßsäule. I have no word in English for it. But it had all kind of, we still have them today in some cities.
Like a bulletin board, but it's a post.
It's round.
Around,
It's
yeah.
round like that. And has a little tower on top, so you can walk around and see what's doing in the theater, ice skating ring, whatever is all on there.
Yeah.
Okay, the size of the bombs, we call them Litfaßsäule because that was the size of them. They were blockbusting. Then they couldn't get any headway, right? They would do that, and that would take care of the whole street. Right? They used to come, there's thousands sometimes in one night, and in waves, right?
Yeah.
And I think the idea, Susan, was to let the German people come up and say we had enough. And it had the opposite effect.
Right.
It had the effect, if they do that to us now, slaughter us, women, I mean, because the cities they knew had nobody in. Everybody was out fighting someplace, west, east, right? And, I mean, Germans had bombed, and that was, I guess, the return. But this was really leveling town by town. Hamburg had an attack. They had also so many dead that they just cemented the streets over in order not to get outbreaks of sickness. They could not, in the beginning they could take what I told you, kids, dead people by the truckload and burn them someplace. But this was like Dresden. It was so bad that they just burned them wherever they had them in order to prevent outbreaks of sickness, right? Cholera or anything could have come back, right?
Yeah.
But it was horrendous because when you thought you were back, there came the next wave, and then in the daytime we used to think we're safe. Well, they got the British would come during the day or vice versa, right? And that's why it was so, to get back to why I brought Mom out in the country. What I wasn't thinking, or we weren't thinking, was we lose the war and the first ones who would come in is from the east.
Right.
So we're in the wrong, we should have gone where we ended up. We should have gone to the Black Forest. Well, I tell you what could have happened. Then my mother could have transferred all her money, which later was anyway exchanged into the new currency, and you lost from there. But we could have sustained a little more of our wealth, right, which we lost.
Right, yeah.
We had to go, they had meetings of going next door.
Yeah, I read about the bombings, and it was
Susan, that's
it was
why
unreal. I mean, you can't even,
I cannot
hundreds and hundreds and
Uncle Bud
hundreds.
too, when he hit Stuttgart, and he got to Stuttgart when we already said, oh boy, isn't it looking good, yeah?
Yeah.
Because the first building started to be built when he came, and life was, oh gosh, you could take trolleys, you could, and Uncle Bud saw Stuttgart, and it kind of hit home how the cities were destroyed without. And then there was another thing, the airplanes weren't as safe as today. They were usually hit already on the way in. So they just dropped whatever they had in order to make it home. But I mean, that wasn't the reason, but that was some of the reason that some of the little towns got it who didn't even know where did this come from. Because there were little villages who were saved, not too many. But it was always that you said, if you're not a big town and just a little bit not too conspicuous, you might survive, they might not do anything. And the Dresden, that disaster, they went under the misconception that the Allies, Susan,
No, I'm good. I'm good. I was just turning this way a little. I'm good.
The Allies wouldn't come because they know about the treasure, culture treasure, which some of them had. Looking back, I cannot see how people could believe that, because we had other beautiful treasures, Egyptian treasures, and paintings, which I guess Hitler already put that underneath. They found it then later. The Americans took it to New York then, but they thought that wouldn't be touched. And especially not 3 days before the war ended. And they did know, I mean, they did know how many millions refugees were in Dresden. They did know all over the city. And that was just one of the big cities where this, what I told you, where all the roads came together. It was more southeast, more northeast, right? You still have today in some cities.
Like a bulletin
they were
board,
all
but
in there.
post.
It's now trying to take a
Yeah.
break and know where to go. Not just the people who lived in
so you
Dresden.
can walk around and see
And
what's
they
doing
kept
in
saying,
the theater, ice skating,
they called it Elbflorenz.
Okay,
The
the
river
size
is
of the bombs.
the Elbe,
Called them
and Florence is
Litfaßsäule,
town, so
because
because
that was
how
the
beautiful
size
it
of
was, right? It
They
had,
were
it's
blockbusters.
right, we knew it
And they
now.
couldn't get
The
any
East it was
right?
East
They would
Germany
do
for a long
that,
time then.
and,
And they tried to do a little
that
bit,
would
but
take
the
care of
West
both
Germans now
streets.
actually redid what it was.
They used to come as
Deadly.
thousands sometimes in one night and in waves. Right?
So then this came down,
Yeah.
And I think the idea,
you know what phosphor is?
was
No.
to get
Phosphor
let the
is a
German
very
people come up
hot,
and say we have
glowing
enough. And it had,
mass,
it had the
which
opposite
some of the bombs had. And
It
they
had
would
the
take
effect that
the
they do that to us
surfacing
now.
on the road and make it into a flowing
Slaughter
lava,
us.
right? And then the heat
because
of
the
the bombs
they knew,
falling
like nobody else.
went
Everybody was
into
out
a
fighting
firestorm.
someplace, yeah?
And this firestorm took the whole city
And
Just like down to
Germans had
Inferno.
farmers, and that was, I guess, the return. That this was
People
really
burned.
leveling.
I mean, they
all
found
that.
people.
Hamburg had an attack.
If they weren't going
so
to
many dead,
ash,
they
some were
just
just to ashes, right?
cemented
But
the
a lot of
streets
them they could
over in
see,
order
like,
not to get a
Pompeii,
trace of
yeah.
that.
How it
Yeah.
was.
And
It isn't the thousands we
They
lost.
could not.
It was
You know,
the
in the beginning, they
senselessness
could
of
take
3 days.
what I told you,
Kids, not even talking
get
about
people
the
by the
beauty
truckload
of
and
what
burn
Western
them
had
someplace.
for
But
Linda
this
to,
was like dreadful.
to do that.
It
Right?
was so bad that they
Because it
burned
didn't
them
bring
wherever
a
they
thing.
had
It
them in
didn't
order
change
to,
that the Americans
prevent
were
outbreaks
already
of,
on one part in Germany,
sickness,
right?
right?
Cholera or anything could have come back.
Yeah.
I
But
was not
it-
embraced,
it,
but it was
horrendous
hit home
because when
because
you
I
thought you were back,
seen so many.
there came the next wave,
And
and then
like to
in the
live,
daytime,
and
we used to
I
think
know.
we're safe. Now they got the
We
the British
and
would
my
come
father
during the
was
day, or vice
silently
versa.
always saying we're getting,
And that's why it
received.
was so, to get back to why I
Propel on
brought
the
Mom
devil.
out in the country.
and I
What I
said,
wasn't
oh,
thinking,
so dramatic.
we
because
weren't thinking
after
was,
all, and I
we
would
lose the war, and
drum the
first
usual
ones
what
would
you
come
heard
in
in school, but look
from the east.
look
Right.
where we
So
are
we're in the
today.
wrong-
We have nobody
Yeah.
without
We
a
should have
job.
gone,
Well,
where we
have
ended
people
up.
taking
We
vacations.
should have gone
We
to the
have
Black Forest.
social system
That,
and so
that
on.
what could have happened.
And then my dad would say,
mother could have transferred
and
all
what
her
else do
money,
we have?
which later
And I
was
said,
anyway
"Well, what do you
exchanged
mean?
into
We're all
the
happy."
new currency, and you lost from
He
there.
said,
But we
"Well,
could have
how
sustained
about
a little more.
or else? Could
And
be people
people
over.
lost.
And I said, where did you hear that? And he said, I hear it, and I'm
Yeah,
beginning
I
to
read
believe
about the
that
bombings
that's
and
true.
it was
Susan,
unbelievable.
that's
It was
why
unreal. I mean, you
I
can't
said,
even,
well, I cannot
hundreds and hundreds and
Uncle Ben
hundreds.
too,
criminals,
when he hit
sexual
Stuttgart,
offenders, and he
They
got to
should be
Stuttgart
put
when
away
we
and
already
work
said,
hard. Yeah.
oh boy, isn't it
And he
looking
didn't
good?
say anything
Yeah.
anymore because
He
the
didn't know
first
either.
buildings
He
were
just
to
had
be
heard
built when
we
he
came
This
and
isn't like we turn
life was,
on.
oh
Yeah.
gosh, you could
Some
take
people
a
had a
car, you
lady,
could,
Mhm.
the
and Uncle
first
Ben
ladies
saw
were there,
Stuttgart.
so we're going far back, and he
And then things got
kind of
real bad.
home.
Somebody said,
You know
how
what?
the
Last
cities
night
were
I searched
The
and
destroyed.
searched on my little
Yeah.
without.
I got BBC.
And then there was another thing.
Americans
The
are
airplanes
supposed
weren't
to
as
be
safe as
on-
today.
And
They were usually hit
My dad said
Oh,
he
that
had
is-
listened.
on the
Someone
way
had told
in.
him that they had
So,
broken sweet
They just
and
dropped
and that's how
whatever
he
they
knew
had
that we should
in
be
order
on
to
the
make
road
it home.
and didn't make it, right?
But I mean, that wasn't the
in
reason,
reality,
but that
you
was
were
some of the
allowed to
reason that
listen
some
to
of the
it.
little
But
towns got it. So you
Susan
didn't even know
have to
where
peer
did this
too
come
much.
from.
Most of the time.
Because there
You
were
couldn't
little
understand
villages.
it. You didn't have
That
the
were
radio
same,
where you said,
not
"Oh,
too
let's
many.
listen to Paris."
But
Yeah.
it was always that
Or
you
let's
said,
get
if you're not a
Channel
big
4
town and
and
just a little bit not too
That wasn't there.
conspicuous, you
I mean,
might
we were
survive.
just
There
in the
might not
beginning
do
of
anything.
radio days.
Beautiful
And
music.
the
If you
Dresden,
Dresden, that disaster, they
station,
went under the
right?
misconception that
Classic music,
the
anything.
Allies,
That was good.
Susan,
No,
here's
I'm good.
so much
I'm good. I was just
information.
turning
Yeah.
this way, Will. I'm good.
The Allies wouldn't come because they know about the treasure.
And there were some,
Culture treasure.
like my
Which
girlfriend, she
Looking back,
the
I
ones who had
cannot
the
see how
thousand
people
acres.
could
I
believe
think
that
it was
because we
clear
had
in the
other
70s and 80s.
beautiful treasures,
She
Egyptian
believed that there
treasures,
was such a thing as a
you know,
concentration
paintings
camp and
which
wasn't staged.
Yeah.
I guess Hitler
Right.
already put that
To
underneath.
make us
They
look,
found it
you know,
later.
and I studied that
Americans
camp.
took it to New
I
York then.
cannot believe
But
that anyone
that they thought that wouldn't be
son,
touched.
husband would be capable
And
of doing
especially
that.
not 3 days before
So
the
we
war
had
ended.
some people who
And they
didn't
could, they did know, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and they did know how many millions
There's other things.
refugees were in Dresden.
Even
They
turned
did
this
know
around.
that.
I told some of the Americans in Essex.
That was just one of the big cities where this, what I told you, where all the roads came together. It was more southeast, more northeast. That had and they were all in there as Jewish, trying to take a break and know where to go. Not just the people who lived in Dresden.
So we all
And they
behaved
kept
very
saying, well,
but I
we are,
tried sometimes
they
to
call it
explain certain things, and they did
Elbfluenz.
listen to
The
them.
river is
And they said, well, we
the
remember,
Elbe
but do you also
influences
remember that?
town, so because how beautiful it
I
was,
said,
right?
I don't. I
It
don't.
had-
Can you not
We
believe
tried
that?
to, we knew it
Because
now.
I wasn't
The
there.
East
I
Ger-
didn't
it,
see
is,
that.
it was
They
East
always
Germany
said,
for a long
you know,
time.
everything was.
And they tried to do a little bit, but the West Germans now actually
we had a
redid
that
what it
was
was.
nice to, for the first time that we
That
could
late.
discuss even this, and I said, and
So when
not
this
to
came down,
erase the guilt.
You know what
Tell me
phosphor
this.
is?
What do you think
Oh.
the Russians did to the
Phosphor is
women?
a very
Children.
hot, glowing
in
mass,
Finland and
which
Siberia,
some of the
et cetera,
bombs
et
had.
cetera.
and they would take the surfacing on the road and make it into a flowing lava, right? You see? And then the heat of the bombs falling and ice went into a firestorm. And this firestorm took the whole city. I mean, just like Danton's Inferno,
Right.
because people burned. I mean, they found people of our point, right? If they weren't burned just to ash, some were just to ashes, right? But a lot of them they could see, like Pompeii, yeah. I know, that's how it was. And it isn't the thousands we lost. It was the senselessness of 3 days. Not even talking about the beauty of what Dresden had, Berlin too, to do that, right? Because it didn't bring a thing. It didn't change that the Americans were already on one part in Germany, right? So I couldn't go.
That's a big question there, right?
It's a big question. So then they said, okay. I was not in Dresden, but it hit home because I had seen so many who like to live, and I know we and my father was violently always saying we're getting the receipt for following the devil. And I said, oh, he's so dramatic because after all, and I would drum the usual what you heard in school, but look where we are today. We have nobody without a job. Yeah? We have people taking vacation. We have a social system and so on. And then my dad would say, and what else do we have? And I said, well, what do you mean? We're all happy. And he said, well, how about putting people away? Yes. And I said, where did you hear that? Yes. And he said, okay, I hear it, and I'm beginning to believe that
what
that's
the explanation was that they were being
and
evacuated.
I said, well, well, they're probably criminals, sexual offenders. They should be put away and work hard. And he didn't say anything anymore because he didn't know either. He just had heard. This isn't like you turn on.
Yeah, no.
Some people had a radio. The first radios were there, Susie. We're going far back. And when things got real bad, somebody said, you know what? Last night I searched and searched on my little thing. I got BBC. The Americans are supposed to be my parents and the movers come tomorrow. My dad said he had listened. Someone had told him that they had broken through this thing. And that's how he knew that we should be on the road because didn't make it. Right? But in reality, you weren't allowed to listen to it. But Susan, they didn't have to fear too much. Most of the time, you couldn't understand it. You didn't have a radio where you say, oh, let's listen to Paris, right? Or let's get Channel 4. Yeah. That wasn't it. I mean, we were just in the beginning of radio days. Beautiful music if you have the local station, right? Classic music, anything. That was good. But information,
Non-existent.
non-existent. And there were some, like my girlfriend, and she thinks the ones who have this house in Italy, I think it was clear in the 70s and 80s that she believed that there was such a thing as a concentration camp. It wasn't staged by to make us look, and I said, Lottie, that can't be. She says, I cannot believe that anyone who is like my son, my husband, would be capable of doing that.
Right. Yeah.
So you had some people who wouldn't even believe it.
Well, yeah.
And well, there's other things. I can even turn this around. I told some of the Americans in Esslingen where we were at the civil censorship, and they were mostly immigrants, Jewish immigrants, because in order to read the letters, you had to have journalists, right?
Right.
And there were Americans, but Jewish, and so therefore they didn't have the best feelings towards us, which I understood fully.
Yeah.
So we all behaved very, that I tried sometimes to explain certain things, and they did listen to me. And they said, well, we remember, but do you also remember what happened to us? Yeah, and so on. And I said, I don't. Can you not believe that? Because I wasn't there. I didn't see that. They always said, you know, everything was okay.
That's right.
So we had a that was nice for the first time that we could discuss even this. And I said, and not to erase the guilt, but tell me this: what do you think the Russians did to the women and children and imprisonments in Siberia, etc., etc.? Thousands of women raped in Berlin. And he said, Edith, you still listen to propaganda. You see, and I shut up because I could not physically bring him something in that minute and say, you tell him. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in the newspaper, believe me. Because, my God, to say anything against, from our point, right? This is about like you just murdered somebody and you're mouthing off what the
But you were a civilian, though.
I know, but we were, I cannot explain, we were a nation of being guilty and of doing anything, and there was this big question, when do you do something, right? Like the one question was, what did you vote in 1933? And I wrote, I was 7 years old, going on 8 years old. So I couldn't vote. Right?
That's a big questionnaire, right?
Right? Big questionnaire. So then they said, okay, so you were too small. But anybody could have gotten up and said no. I said, no to what? To eat better? To go on the ship when you have vacation for just your salary? For social insurance? Tell me for what? For streets? You can drive. Anybody can drive on there. People all of a sudden, my dad had a car shop. Bought the smaller cars, bought cars. People who were workers said, this is the first time I feed my family. I go out on Sunday. Yeah? So it happened, but it didn't happen like today in view of TV. Yeah? Today this couldn't have happened because...
One of the things that I read,
Yeah?
just let me, before I forget, one of the things that I read was that the civilian, that it could have been noticeable depending on where you lived.
Yes.
A lot of Jews were leaving.
Yes. Okay.
But wait,
Yeah.
let me finish with my thought. But what the explanation was that they were being evacuated.
Yeah.
In other words, implying for their safety.
Okay. Now I tell you my point.
Okay.
We were in Berlin West. I was going to elementary school. I told you
Yeah.
we had nothing but very, very rich Jewish families. They had big names. Liza was a shoe company. Karstadt was a department store. We had the girls in my class. You know what happened?
What?
I lost one girlfriend after another. They went to England.
That was when they were still allowed to leave.
And nobody said they were allowed to leave. You know what they told me? My parents and the movers come tomorrow, and we are going to England.
Oh, wait, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I
Yeah,
understand. From
right?
your point of view, it's like
Yeah.
they're moving to England.
And they
Yeah,
sure did.
right, yeah.
With all their household. Because
Right,
I
yeah.
used to sit there, watch the movers, talk to them. One was, her name was Uschi Atlas. She helped me because I always cried the first day. And I said, you write me from England. Why are you going to England? And she said, I don't really know. My dad thinks we have it better there. And I thought, well, how stupid. They have this beautiful house, and why would they have it better in England, right? And then another girl I didn't know so good, they went to England. Okay. The next thing I remember, even being confronted with anything, was just waking up, going to school, and seeing all of a sudden writing on the stores and things thrown in. And not to buy there. And I remember that going to Clark's. Yeah. Well, I didn't know it was Crystal. Not that
Was
they
that what
didn't
it
have
was?
they didn't have a name for it. The night before, the ambassador Rath was his name, Rode Rath, got killed in Paris,
Yeah.
right? And they said that the SA, not the government, brought it on themselves to get retaliation for, against the Jewish people because he, the Jew, killed without any provocation, So I thought, well, that was one time. Then the things were wiped off, the glasses were restored. The Jewish stores did not disappear right away. They even had the same names over them, but the owners all of a sudden were somebody else. Yeah. And then another thing in that night I remember, from the Kristallnacht that I can say we had a little bird in the cage, and my mom woke me up. And that was at night, but this isn't like somebody wakes you up and says, hey, this is Kristallnacht.
Yeah, of course not.
Right?
You wouldn't know.
So she says, we're on the 5th floor. This is this fancy building, right? Everything lift and heat. And she said, get Hansi, the bird. There is smoke in the stairway, but not in the back stairway. The back stairway was for the maid and for people to bring garbage down, right? And so we're all going down. We have no idea where that smoke is coming from, right? We asked the people underneath, do you have fire? No. So what it was, the downstairs apartment, just as big as ours, about 7 big rooms, kitchen, was rented to a Jewish religious church. And they had their meetings there. And I was always fascinated how that sounded when they sung, right? That's about all I know. And when we came down, there was naturally nobody in there because they didn't sleep there, right? Last night. So then, all of a sudden, some of them came, and fire was out. The firework was already there, and it wasn't much damage. The glass and things, and we had these little things, and we were all together on the floor saying, God, I wonder how that got started. And this guy who helped me, he was one of the deacons or wherever the Jewish people got. He said, he knew my mother. And he said, you know why, Mrs. Don't you? And my mom said, I know, dear, it seems to be sad times, yeah? But I still, why would they do it? And then even my dad said, this must not be the reason, because they weren't even there doing anything, yeah? So, again, they put the pictures back in. They met still a couple times there. And then this guy said to our manager of the building that he was going to quit by October or so and move out. It wasn't like somebody dragged anybody out in front of my eyes.
That was till 1939, right?
That was the Kristallnacht was before that.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Because there's a recent, I thought it was the 65th anniversary, or
maybe it was 38. Kristallnacht was before, in 38. I have to look. It was before, dear.
Because one of the other things I read was in the early going when they were doing that, the way they were getting the Jews was not in a dramatic way, but things like just saying, well, you stole something to somebody and then he'd disappear.
It started,
that kind of thing, just slowly.
Susan, it started, how can I say, not even as open, I would say, and in my surroundings, right? Not as open as in the South, attacking the Negroes.
Exactly.
It started in a way of kind of these first words. Why do they have all the department stores? Why they own all the money? You know.
Yeah.
And then someone would say, well, my father owns money, and so on. It was more a discussion. Well, yeah, but he doesn't believe in Jews, right? And somehow it was always milled under, that's true, but how good we have it. I mean, today it didn't make any sense, but because you, I guess, couldn't believe anything drastic didn't go on. Right. Yeah. Because they're free, and it was true, they're free to leave, but only for a while.
Exactly. Right? When did that stop? Because that was like in the late 30s, I think.
Yeah, I would say that when the war came, it was pretty much, the borders were already, when the war came, the Germans couldn't travel anymore, and this reason, right? And naturally there. And another thing that brought up from them, the having stars, that brought it to the surface. And I remember this drummed in when somebody enters the subway or trolley, mostly subway in Berlin, right? You get up. Anybody young, older than you, well, that's easy, right? Everybody was older than you. So I got up. And somebody said to me, you don't need to get up, that's a Jewish person. And as a kid, you believe everything. I thought about it, but I still stood standing. And I came and said, don't you want to sit down? She said, you heard the lady. I shouldn't sit down.
She's scared to sit down.
And I told this to my mom, and she said, yeah, this is now stars and things. It's not going to take nimmt kein gutes Ende. It does not take a good end, right? And my dad was very much against it because I remember